Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what's happening in the Russian economy because we have seen probably the biggest movement in terms of sanctions since the war in Ukraine started. 10 days before he's due to exit from the role of President of the USA, Joe Biden has come in with some Armageddon sanctions. Now, up until now, the USA and Europe have been cautious about cutting off the supply of oil coming out of Russia. And one of the reasons for that is because world oil supplies are finely balanced. And if Russian oil had been completely banned immediately following the invasion of Ukraine, it would have sent oil prices spiking around the world and probably would have sent the whole of the global economy into a deep recession. If we'd have seen oil prices hitting $200, which a lot of people were predicting at that time, it would have caused major problems. So there was a balancing act to strike. And the way that the West decided to sanction Russian oil was by applying a price cap. And if you've been following the channel, you'll know that it's been very difficult for the West to actually exercise that price cap because there's been lots of ways that Russian oil companies have been getting around it. Firstly, they were adding lots of shipping costs and other costs on top of the actual cost of the oil. So officially they could sell a barrel of oil for $60, which was the price cap that had been set. But if then you add on another $20 per barrel for transit and various other things, then obviously you're actually being paid more per barrel than you're allowed to be, but technically that's a loophole. So the USA and the West have been struggling to be able to bring down all of the amount of oil that was being transported. However, on January the 10th, the Joe Biden administration announced the toughest sanctions yet on Russian oil.
Now, before we go on any further today, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Galaxy Lamps. Have you ever dreamt of having a starry night sky right in your room? Well, you could achieve exactly that with the Galaxy Projector. If you're looking for a magical touch, then the Galaxy Projector could be exactly the thing that you're looking for, because it isn't just a light, it turns your space into an otherworldly planetarium. And the great news is that it's on sale right now. The Galaxy Projector is ideal to set the mood all year round because it's a smart lamp. Through the use of its app, your phone can control all the magic. With shades of ghoulish green to phantom purple, you can control brightness, rotation and more. If you've got Alexa or Google Assistant, you just say the word and the Galaxy Projector will obey, changing its settings, turning on and off without lifting a finger. And there's no need to fear a monstrous electricity bill as the Galaxy Projector is energy efficient. So if you're looking to treat yourself or for a fantastic present for somebody else, then check out the sale by clicking in the link below.
And the big change in terms of the latest sanctions is that the USA are now targeting state-owned Russian oil companies. In an official press release, the US Treasury announced that it was sanctioning Russia's largest state-owned oil company, Gazprom Neft, along with the second largest, Surgutneft. And the reason why this is going to be such a big blow to the Russian economy is that in 2024, these two companies exported 970,000 barrels of oil every single day. And if you apply an average price of around $75 per barrel to those 970,000 barrels, that gives you total revenue for 2024 of over $73 billion. And that is going to be lost as a result of these direct sanctions. One of the other problems that the West has had in terms of applying the sanctions and the price caps has been that Russia has been using what's been termed a grey or dark fleet. So these are ships that have been moving Russian oil illegally. So they haven't been showing all of their documentation. They've just been moving the oil. And often this oil is then transported mid-ocean. So there's a ship-to-ship transfer, and then it's actually taken to a port by a legitimate ship. And this is something that's been very difficult to crack down on. However, the USA has now announced further sanctions against all of these ships. The US Treasury press release states that 183 vessels, largely oil tankers, that are part of the Shadow Fleet, as well as oil tankers owned by Russian-based fleet operators, have now been added to the sanctions list. The press release went on to say that several of the vessels sanctioned have shipped not only Russian oil, but also sanctioned Iranian oil, and that two of Russia's largest shipping insurance providers have now also been sanctioned. In addition to the dark fleet vessels that have now been sanctioned, the US has also sanctioned Russia's state-owned shipping company Sovcomflot and specifically identified 69 vessels, including 59 oil and product tankers and 4 liquefied natural gas tankers that are owned by Sovcomflot. And this graphic shows the total number of tankers that have been sanctioned directly between October 2023 And January the 10th, 2025 really puts the impact of those additional shipping sanctions into perspective. On October the 12th, 2023, only 2 Russian oil tankers had actually been sanctioned directly. Between October 23 and December 24, there was a steady increase in the number of ships that had been sanctioned. And as of December the 16th, the total was sitting at 135. However, the latest sanctions that have now been announced by the USA has more than doubled that figure, and this is going to cause major problems in conjunction with the sanctions that have now been applied against the Russian oil businesses. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because I think the latest sanctions that have been announced by the Joe Biden administration are a really big move in terms of closing down the amount of revenue that Russia is receiving. This chart shows the monthly breakdown of Russian fossil fuel export revenues dating back to the start of 2022. And what you can see here is that in 2023 and 2024, there has been a significant reduction in the amount of revenue that Russia is receiving. However, if you look at the latest figures for December 24, you can see that the lion's share of the revenue that Russia is receiving is still coming from oil exports. And that's a combination of seaborne crude oil sales via pipelines to China, and seaborne oil products. So that's refined oil products such as gasoline and diesel. And one of the problems that the West has had over the past 2 years is actually managing the sanctions, trying to make sure that they are applied. And one of the biggest problems has been the oil price cap. And as I said at the start of today's video, the reason why the cap was introduced rather than an outright ban was that there were concerns about the global supply of oil and pushing the global economy into recession. However, the USA is now producing more oil than ever before. It's the largest oil producer, and it's in a situation where it's able to potentially take up the slack that could be formed if Russian oil is pushed out of the global market. And what we've seen in today's video is that Joe Biden has decided as his legacy that he wants to sign off with a huge statement, and he's come in with some Armageddon sanctions that rather than trying to apply price caps and insurance restrictions and shipping restrictions for all of the oil, he's decided to go straight to the heart of the matter and sanction the state-owned Russian oil companies. And this is the first time that this has been done. And the problem that that's going to cause Russia is that India and China will now run the risk of secondary sanctions. So if they continue buying oil from those 2 state-owned entities that have now been sanctioned, they potentially will face the same sanctions themselves. And as we've discussed in many previous videos, the majority of China and Indian exports do not go to Russia. They go to the rest of the world. So China is not going to gamble around 98% of its global revenues so it can stay in relationships with Russia. It will not want to run the risk of being hit with those secondary sanctions, particularly because the Chinese economy is sitting on the verge of a turning point at the moment. We could see a major slump forming over the course of the next 6 to 12 months in China. So China will be desperate to maintain its trading relationships with everybody in the world, as will India. So these sanctions are really going to hurt Russia right at the source of the matter. They won't be able to do the deals with India and China at all. Up until now, those companies could do deals officially with India and China as long as they were maintaining the prices at or below the price caps. However, now they simply won't be able to do any business whatsoever. Now, obviously, one of the big questions here is what's going to happen when Donald Trump takes over. On the 20th of January, he will be the president, and he potentially could come in and say that he's going to undo these sanctions. But I think that's pretty unlikely because firstly, you'd have to get Congress to approve it, so it would take a bit of time. But secondly, I think these sanctions are going to be a good bargaining chip in terms of what happens with the war in Ukraine. And Donald Trump has said that he wants to bring that war to an end. And the fact that the USA is now cutting off all of this revenue from the 2 biggest state-owned oil companies is really going to hurt Russia and potentially could accelerate some sort of peace settlement, but that remains to be seen. Let's see what happens when Donald Trump takes over. But the overall summary of today's video is that the sanctions that have now been announced by the USA as a legacy for the Joe Biden administration are the most aggressive that we've seen since the war in Ukraine started. The 2 biggest state-owned Russian oil companies have now been sanctioned directly, as has the biggest shipping company, and also over 180 dark tankers that have been moving Russian oil, as well as two of the largest insurance companies in Russia that have been providing insurance for all of that shipping. So this is going to be a huge blow to Russian oil, and it's going to be a huge blow to the Russian economy, and it'd be really interesting to see what happens when Donald Trump does take over. So hopefully you found today's video useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.